Hi, everyone. I am Angel Borrelli, and welcome to Angel Borrelli Pitching. You are listening to Episode 1 of Season 12 of The Fix, a podcast dedicated to teaching and protecting our baseball pitchers. Today's topic, pitching injuries. Velocity is not the enemy. The MLB Pitching Injury Report released the findings of its first phase of research to determine some possible causes for the increasing number of pitching injuries, especially to the UCL. It interviewed 200 baseball coaches, instructors, doctors, and other related professionals and found a 100% consensus that velocity was driving the injury crisis. The report stated that in the second phase of their research, they were going to look into solutions that might possibly include new recovery guidelines, MLB rule changes, and other things that might limit the pitcher in multiple ways to preserve his arm. I had multiple reactions to the report, as I would never have suggested velocity as the problems, because it is, along with deception and location, one of the objectives of the skill. I wanted to take a deeper look at the findings and offer you a different way to think about and view the pitching injury situation. To do that, I have with me today two excellent pitchers, Rallin, Covey, and Joe DeMers. After I talk with the boys, I will highlight three important take-home messages. Rallin and Joe, thank you so much for being here. Before we jump in on this article, I want you to tell the listeners about yourself and your baseball pitching background. So, Rallin, let's start with you.
Yeah, hi, Angel. Thanks for having me on. I'm a junior. I go to Sacred Heart Prep and play with NorCal in the summer. I committed to USC last year, and I've been pitching my whole life and have been with Angel since I was 10, I think.
Yes, wow. And you're how old now? Turning 17, right?
Yeah, turning 17 in June.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Joe, the listeners might remember you from season 10 when you were my co-host. In fact, your little episode on the two-seam is one of my most popular episodes. And I send all my pitchers there when they want to know how to throw a sinker. So everybody kind of remembers you. But go ahead and reintroduce yourself for my new listeners.
Yes. Hello, listeners. My name is Joe DeMers. I am a pitcher. I am currently retired. I did my baseball playing at College Park High School, as well as University of Washington, and played in the minor leagues with the Oakland Athletics for 5 seasons. I started working with Angel when I was 11 years old, and we kicked it off ever since. We've had bullpens and strength training sessions ever since, and she's a big reason for my successes.
Wow. Thank you, Joe. Wow. That is cool. So everybody, I want you to know why I chose Joe and Rallin to kind of be the pitching voice for this article that came out on, pitching injuries. So first of all, as they both mentioned, Rallin was, I think, 10 years old, turning 11 when I got with him, and that was in 2019. And of course, Joe doesn't realize this, but he was one of my first guinea pigs up until 2007. And I had started with pitchers in 95. I had only worked with minor leaguers and major league players. And in 2007, through an inspiration, I decided to walk onto a field to donate time with youth pitchers. And through that, my business developed and I met Joe. Joe, Trevor Larnack with the Twins, Willie McIver, Rockies, now with the A's, were part of an experimental group of pitchers who were 11 years old, and I brought them as a group into the gym. And there was born the methods and techniques that I use to help pitchers stay safe. And Rallin, he's kind of my 2.0 guinea pig. And he, at the same age, was lifting weights, doing some home dumbbell work. And the methods I used with Joe, I used with Rallin, and of course, all my other pitchers. And of course, Joe, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm way smarter now than I was even back then. So I wish you had gotten the best. I wish you had gotten the absolute best from me, but you were the inspiring part. Without these two guys, my business could not be where it is, and I could not be as smart as I am today about pitching, because any good coach will tell you You're only as good as the people you work with, the challenges they represented, and everything. So, first, that's why I brought them on, because I have sort of longitudinal evidence, which in science is critical to say, hey, what we do worked. If it just started yesterday, it doesn't mean anything. But it started way back in 2010, 29, when I could actually show evidence of what was being done. Secondly, Joe, when you got drafted by the A's, what was in your medical folder?
Nothing.
Okay. Rallin, when your mother was uploading all the papers for USC when you were about to sign, what was it that she had nothing to upload?
No injuries.
Exactly. No medical papers at all. So that's another reason why they're on here. All this time, no injuries. Joe, when you pitched, and so everyone, I had Joe with me, complete control of him until his senior year, throughout his senior year. And then, of course, when he left me, I was still able to work with him, but not to the same degree. So I'm usually speaking to the time when I had complete control over everything. So, Joe, in your last appearance of high school season, I think we're at St. Mary's. I think we were playing in the playoffs. What was the top velocity you hit?
I believe I was hitting 95 at that time.
Yes, exactly. And Rallin, you are a junior and you've had various places where velocity that you trust has been taken. What's the highest velocity you've seen ever? And when was that?
The highest velocity I've seen was last summer when I hit 91, and I haven't been clocked too much this year, so I'm excited to see where that's going to be at.
Exactly. So these two guys have increased their velocity. They've never had an injury, and they're going to tell you more about it as we discuss the paper. But for all the listeners out there that wrote me and were the parents who were completely scared, thinking that injuries must be inevitable if their kid is trying to throw hard. And for all the coaches that wrote me with frustration about what is going to happen if they start changing rules and some of the things they suggested in the article, when they're blaming velocity in a way, or at least the people they interviewed blame velocity. What's going to happen, and the kind of frustration they felt, because they know that there are other reasons why pitchers get injured. So having that kind of experience with these guys, I thought it would be great for you to hear from them. But the most reason I asked these guys on is because of the great respect I have for both of them. Not only are they great pitchers and great athletes, but they're great guys. And there's nothing more that can be said when you bring those three things together. And I've seen both of them at their worst. I've seen them at their best. I've seen them when you work with somebody who goes from the age of 10 and then transitions into teenage and then into their 20s, which I saw with Joe. It's an amazing experience. So it's been an honor to work with you guys. It's an honor to be with you here today. And so let's get started on the article. So I sent you both the article. And Joe, I want to start with you. Just generally speaking, tell me what you thought about this article that raised so much interest by all my listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was super vague. They didn't really dive in super deep to any topic, really. They kind of put the blame on pitchers' injuries being due to effort, which I don't believe is the case. They rarely talk about mechanics or mechanical adjustments, proper technique in training. So overall, it was just kind of very blah.
When you say effort, do you mean when they were referring to high velocity, meaning that pitchers are trying really hard to throw hard?
Yeah, it's one of the first reasons they came up with was that there was a broad consensus that pitchers chasing max effort velocity is a driving cause of injuries. But that just makes me think, what are they supposed to do? What, you don't want pitchers to get an uptick in velo. You don't want them to try and improve. It kind of made me think of like a sprinter trying to get better by jogging. That's not going to happen.
Excellent analogy. Exactly. Rallin, what was your take on the article?
Yeah, building off Joe, I mean, it seemed like they went straight to the end result of velocity opposed to all the steps that pitchers take to gain that velocity. And then it also, like, it wasn't very specific to any pitcher at all. Like, every guy's going to vary his mechanics or routine, whether that's pre and post throw or whether that's just lifts in the gym. And all those factors have a huge impact on whether you get hurt or not. And none of that was really mentioned.
Exactly. So they interviewed 200 people, which I don't think any of them were pitchers. And that's why I asked you two guys on. And I thought it was interesting that, and Glenn even mentioned this in the article, he said that he was intrigued that all 200 people that they interviewed, which included private instructors, pitching coaches, physical therapists, people in the baseball world, coaches, etc., that they all thought it was velocity, which is scary because, Joe, as you mentioned, the definition of pitching is that you throw a ball trying to deceive a hitter, trying to get him not to swing at it. So you place it somewhere where it's going to challenge him. And you also have to do it with a certain amount of speed so he can't hit it. Your job is to get outs, right?
Yeah, it's expected that you go max effort when you're pitching in a game. Can you imagine if you didn't pitch 100% and you gave up a bunch of runs and you let your team down because you weren't giving it all you had?
Exactly, exactly. Rallin, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just thought that talking about how max effort is bad was interesting. And I think that they were talking more about like max effort in every single bullpen you throw could be bad, but I don't think they specified that enough. And yeah, somebody that could walk away from the article thinking like, if I go 100% in game, that could be bad.
Yeah, and just to your comment about the max effort thing in bullpens, even if a pitcher goes max effort in a bullpen, it's not going to be the same velocity because velocity is a product of chemistry as well as other things, and you just don't get that in a bullpen. So I think they were talking about max effort in a game.
Yeah, and another thing in the article, they didn't touch on warming up, warming down, pitch count, and recovery, which I think are also huge factors in the current injury epidemic in pitchers.
So, yeah, I totally agree, Joe. And I want you guys to hear something that was in The Athletic yesterday. And the Yankees reliever, Luke Weaver, said this, okay, because they were talking about pitchers accept the risk of throwing hard as the cost of chasing a dream. So I'm going to quote this article because it's quoting Luke. It's all about stuff and throwing hard, said Yankees reliever Luke Weaver. If you're not in this game, if you're kind of outside looking in order to get seen, to get a tryout or make a team, you've got to look pretty good on paper. And the feel for the pitching, throwing 88 miles an hour, but commanding it and getting people out is not really sexy. So that makes it tough. Everybody sells out to the maximum potential the body's able to give, and it has limitations. With what we're demanding of the body, it's kind of like a ticking time bomb. So I think this speaks to one, he's exactly right, isn't he? 88 miles an hour, even if you're getting outs. Are you happy?
No, yeah, I've noticed that a lot in the travel ball circuit where there's pitchers that are committed to big time schools that are like 92, 93, but walk six guys a game. And then there's a pitcher that's like 86 that goes the entire game, maybe one walk, but just doesn't have a lot of strikeouts and doesn't light up the radar gun that gets no looks.
Exactly. So, do you guys find it interesting that the major leagues, which commissioned the commission to do this study of why are there injuries, although they didn't say, what's up with velocity, they did say what are the injuries, but do you find that in one way they're saying one thing, but in another way, that's why velocity couldn't be the answer. In fact, I'm thinking that if the major leagues read this report, they would say those 200 people are crazy and you're going to have to go deeper than that. which is what we're doing right now. We're going deeper than that. It seems like an easy thing to blame. Am I right? And it's impossible. It's sort of like if you asked me for a solution to a pain that you have, and I said something ridiculous, like, well, if you cut off your thumb, or if you don't use your thumb in pitching, or if you do this or you do that, but it was totally impossible, you would lose so much faith in me, because it's like, why would I even say something if it's an impossible thing to accomplish? So when we see there's a problem and somebody's solution ever points to something that is impossible, you lose a sense of trust in the source of that information. Have a feeling of hopelessness. And that is why so many people have reacted to that. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, and velo, it is important. That's how you get seen. That's how you get scouted, and that's how you keep your job in the pros, unfortunately. But there's a way to throw hard and stay healthy. It's not like one or the other.
Exactly, which is what we're going to talk about right now. So here we have a professional pitcher saying the body's a ticking time bomb. Well, if I thought the body was a ticking time bomb, I would be in big trouble, because part of my job is to help you throw harder. Now, in 1995, when I started with pitchers, and I was simultaneously starting my master's work, and I was working as a strength coach and an Olympic weightlifting coach, and I was working with male athletes, and it was in 95 that a pitcher was sent to me, and I gave up all other athletes and decided to focus on pitching, because I loved the skill, I loved the art, and I loved what I could feel going on in the inside of his head, which is what goes on in the heads of true pitchers. You guys are amazing beings. It's why you can be in the middle of the game on a mound high up. Everything's on you. If bases are loaded, you've got to ignore it. If you get a home run, somebody hits a home run off you, you got to ignore it. You got to keep grinding. You don't have a normal life. Everything has to be about pitching. And if you work with me, you are 24/7 invested in your pitching. So you guys are why I am doing what I do now. And when I started studying pitching, I saw, and everything I know about pitching, I learned. So there's nothing I say that I make up. I can give you, if you say one thing I say, that's not right, I can give you 10 textbooks, references, whatever, because I spent hours a day doing research. This is what they teach you in graduate school. We don't want to know what you think in a way. It's not our opinions. You have to speak with background. You have to speak with knowledge. So in studying pitching, I knew that something wasn't right, that pitchers weren't being trained correctly. And if you guys remember, I started in 95. Those were days when pitchers didn't even lift weights. So when I went to schools, junior colleges, and said, give me your pitchers, I want to do an experimental weight training program, the coaches were like, what? Pitchers should have muscles? And yet the catcher's standing there and he's completely jacked, right? It's like, wait a minute. And pitchers got a bad name. But I studied my butt off to learn every single thing. And if I thought that throwing hard was the problem, how can the product of a body be a problem? Because if you can do it, you can do it, but it's how you do it. So I'm from it's how you do what you do, not the product. That's why velocity cannot be the problem. Now, I think one of the biggest problems, the reason why pitchers get injured, is because the thought and the essence of pitching being a precision skill has been lost. I think that way back when pitchers started thinking that if they threw 200 feet or if they threw 160 feet, that they would get arm strength, I think we started getting off track. Number one, the precision skill is 60 feet 6 inches. You're going downhill. That means certain muscles are working. You have to locate that pitch in a target that's not very big. And you have to be able to bring a fresh arm to the mound. All of those things are lost if you start throwing long distances. It was sold as an idea for being a way to get arm strength. But you guys both know that you don't throw with your arm. So we know that velocity comes from how well you rotate, that it's sequenced, that the segments are done separately and they're sequenced and they transfer energy into the arm, which delivers the pitch with the wrist, and that the placement of the hand and the release point is a product of how well you weight shift, do the rotation, and it delivers everything to the end product. So there could be no arm strength for velocity coming from throwing long distance, because all of those things, the way you shift your weight, the way you rotate, and even the angle, meaning the fibers in the muscles that you use for pitching, are not being used. And I think when that started happening, people started jumping on board because everybody knows they need velocity. No one really wants to work to get it. There aren't enough practitioners out there that understand how velocity really is developed. And so everyone's left alone trying to figure it out. And of course, if you didn't have anybody, you might say, hey, that sounds awesome. And doesn't it kind of make sense? I'm going to throw 200 feet and then I'm going to have a stronger arm, not realizing that the precision is not being practiced. So now you're putting in hours of training doing something and you end up doing it more than you actually do your pitching. So I think the loss of the idea of precision in pitching is one of the main problems for the problems with injuries, in addition to the injuries that can occur. What do you guys think about that concept?
Yeah, I think mechanics are so delicate. Like if you throw a long toss, it could ruin your rhythm when you get to the mound because it's so sensitive that it's almost not even worth it. Even if you do gain arm strength from it, it most likely won't translate to the mound.
Exactly. Rallin, what do you think about the loss of precision, the idea of it being a precision skill and practicing it like that? What do you think about that? What do you see going on in high school?
Yeah, a big thing in today's baseball world are pull downs, whether that's with a baseball or a plyout, or you're just chucking it as hard as you can into a wall or net to gain arm strength. And I just feel like that really speaks to your point that the precision has kind of been taken out of it in the search for velocity, just because there's no target at all.
Exactly. And throwing to a target is part of it. So there's a high school coach that I was talking to the other day, and 7 of his pitchers are out with injuries. And they were doing this training program, which I was watching them do, and they were doing what you're talking about, Rowland, the pull downs. And they all have injuries. One elbow, we've got elbow, shoulder, back, and he is in a bind. And this started 2 months ago, and I saw this happening. And I thought to myself that it's scary. I mean, there's no parent that would let their kid do it if they knew. I don't think any kid does it if they know. But what is it that do you think? I mean, we look at it and go, I'm sure you guys see people doing this and it looks like ouch when you look at it. What do you think is the reason why there's no light going off like that looks like it could hurt me? I mean, are people really that blind or unconscious? Or I mean, I understand the drive to achieve something, but how can someone, especially when they see their friends going down around them with injuries, because the injuries are so prevalent, what do you think goes on in their head? What do you think they care, or do you think they are willing, like this article was saying, they're willing to take the risk?
No, I was going to say, I think they're just willing to take the risk. Like you said, I'm sure there's some guys that do it and gain velo and don't get hurt. And they're like, I can be one of them.
Oh yeah, I think that velocity can blind you. When a coach can tells a player you'll go from 85 to 92 if you do this for 4 months. I feel like that can kind of in their head outweigh any risk of injury or anything. And even with you, Angel, when the pocket radar comes out in my bullpens, I'm just kind of solely focused on that. And I think that can happen to pitchers who are doing things in a more dangerous way, and that can just kind of take their mind off the risk and just place it on the end result of possible velocity.
Exactly. And it's why you really have to talk me into it to even pull it out. And it's why, you notice the other day I had it out and you never know the number. All I do is tell you, oh, it was faster than the one before.
Yeah.
So, exactly. One of the coaches over at a high school where I'm at purchased Rapsodo. And I said to him, he's the owner of a travel team. And I said, why haven't you used Rapsodo? I saw you. I was dying to jump over and see what's up. He says, you can't. These kids, he has a travel team and it's youth pitching. And so it's probably eighth grade, maybe some freshmen. And he says, oh, when we put it out, the kids all come swarming around it. Number one, they want to see the numbers. The only number they know is velocity. And it distracts the whole session. They don't work on anything. They don't care about their technique. They just start focusing on throwing and then running over to see the number that popped up. And he said, so that's it. He says, and I said, do you think it's their age? He says, I think it's their age, but it's also the conversation. And they see that that's what's happening. He says, so I can't bring it out. I said, well, that thing cost you thousands. He says, I know, but he says, it was so disruptive. He said, once in a while, I maybe can use it, but not really. He says, that's why I keep it gone. But he said, but I'm happy to have you out and we can go over it and look at it. I mean, and this is with kids that are really young. So you guys are right. It's really crazy. I think that in addition to the lack of precision, all these things they're doing, whether it be weighted balls, all the things that I'm talking about that actually take away from the precision, I see because pitchers pitch twice a week and I see them doing these things on all the other days. So what we then have is a pitcher who is practicing his skill less. Well, not you guys or Rallin, especially Joe. Some of the stuff I do with Rallin now, he's busy every day working on his skill. But most pitchers are either sitting around or they're doing all these other things. What do you think about the fact that nowadays pitchers are putting more time, they're spending more time doing things that take away precision than they are on actually it? Let's say they were getting something from it. They couldn't even integrate it because they only work on the lack of precision, exotic methods, and then expect to be precise twice a week. Do you see that as an issue? And do you guys, and Rallin, especially you, do you see that going on? More of everything else, less of pitching.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you were talking about with the Rapsodo, it's like in every facility that claims to be developmental, there's like always a gun on you. So the focus is rarely pitching. It's like even with off-speed pitches, it's like pitch shape or spin rate or something like that versus like how your pitches perform versus hitters and getting outs. And like, well, pitch shapes are obviously super important. I feel like the focus is getting off of actually pitching.
Exactly, the art of pitching. The last thing, because these are my three big ones for me as to why pitchers are getting injured. So let's say somebody was getting something from long toss, or let's say they were getting something from weighted balls. Those are things that you have to recover from because they already know the forces are double, tripled, quadrupled, depending on your distance and long toss. That's what science says. Science says this clearly. Weighted balls, we know that there's things that happen in the arm and in the shoulder with that as well, and the elbow. But they're using them before starts, in between starts, right before they pitch, when they're in recovery. So I think that an arm, so science has shown that fatigue is the number one reason for injury. But people think that means, okay, the pitcher's thrown 79 pitches. Let's pull him, even though he's doing well because his arm might be fatigued. No, fatigue happens in like 5 different locations throughout your system. When you are doing something, even if you can't feel fatigue, if it's innervating onto your nervous system, like, let's say, long toss, like, let's say something that causes you to breathe really deeply, like when you're doing cleans or snatches or you're running 40s or whatever. Whenever you are innervating or imposing some kind of force on a system, it has to recover. If a pitcher's arm is not recovered from that bout, even though he can't feel it, he's going to the mound without a 100% recovered arm. So fatigue is part of the reason why a muscle has to work extra hard. So we know that fatigue is bad. So we don't want pitchers to pitch when they're fatigued. And we can see that. The stride changes. We have markers. Science has shown what to look for. And you guys know it too. You know when you're tired, your stride changes. All of a sudden you're walking, guys, and then you get pulled. A good coach can tell because your mechanics do change. If the muscle has to push through that, it's working harder. And if a muscle's working harder, then it's getting fatigued faster. So if you want to know why UCL injuries are on the rise, well, the forearm, which is a very interesting muscle group, and it is always the precursor to the UCL problem. If that forearm is getting more work, rotating your arm, rotating your wrist like it does, because you're throwing 200 feet or you're throwing an 11-ounce weighted ball, and you're doing this, and then you're throwing regular, and then you're combining this with a warm-up program that uses bands that weigh too much, and then you get on the mound and then you pitch. That forearm has lost its capability to protect the ligaments that are below it because the muscles protect the ligaments below. So the reason why UCLs are blowing out isn't because, they say, oh, it's not strong enough to handle the force. Yes, it is strong enough when the muscles around it supply the extra protection. That's why you can't have fatigued muscles. So if they're doing all these extra things that create extra fatigue, now we've got a fatigued arm. And now the pitcher who thinks he's going to the pen and he's going to really throw gas, he's working with a fatigued arm, which makes him wonder if it's working. If it does look like it's working, he's producing more velocity with a weakened arm because there's no way those things don't affect the arm. What do you guys think about that? And do you see pitchers, using these methods and then going immediately into a game or a bullpen?
That is a great point, Angel. I see pitchers all the time, especially in pro ball, throw weighted balls right before they toss for the day or get on the mound for a bullpen. So I'm sure that'll fatigue the forearm as well as other muscles around the UCL, and they do that every time they get on the mound.
And they know no better. Rallin, what do you see in high school? Do you see any of that?
Yeah, I would say the majority of pitchers on the other side when I'm going are throwing weighted balls or doing long toss or both. And a lot of times I've noticed in the first inning when they come out, their location is severely made worse. And I would have to assume it's from doing all that because I've never had issues. And then I don't think any of your pitchers have ever had issues who don't do weighted balls or long toss with location. I mean, yeah, that's just one of the main things I've noticed in high school baseball.
Exactly. So, guys, I want to talk about, and then we'll wrap up this wonderful interview. I want to talk about some of the rules of the road that you guys, for some reason, I was lucky enough to have you pitchers, the two of you, and of course, all my pitchers, because in my business, we develop velocity from the inside out. You lift weights to make sure your structure is sound. You have great posture when you're pitching and doing all your exercises. We keep you healthy, but there are some other rules that we followed that aren't as obvious that I think are the reasons why you never got injured. Because it's not that you didn't ever have soreness. It's not that something didn't go wrong where, Joe, I remember you calling me from the dugout one time saying, hey, I feel this or that. And we would get on it. And Joe, other than your hamstring pull, you never have missed a start, right?
Correct.
And Rallin, have you ever missed a start?
No, never have.
Yeah, and we've had soreness to deal with because, Rallin, you're so tall and so long-legged, and because you've developed so fast along with your height, we have had things to deal with, but we always deal with everything the same way, dealing with the body. We never panic, and you always come out the other side, and your improvement is still on a steady upward projection. So I wanna go over just mention these things, and I want you to weigh in on it. So one of the primary rules to not be injured is that there's always was with me early prediction of something that could happen. And the reason way I would do that is because we use film analysis. I'm not just standing there looking at you. When somebody just looks at you, there's many things you see. And in fact, what we see with our eyes tells us a lot. But the detail of film analysis, and I'm not talking about biomechanics where I'm telling you you're 15 degrees off. I'm talking about looking at your film, seeing what's wrong, knowing that what we see we don't like isn't the problem, that what you did prior to that is what caused that issue. And doing that on a weekly basis, meaning every session I do when you're throwing, whether it's flat ground or pitching, we're using film analysis. So early prediction to prevent injury because science has taught me, and this is the research that, by the way, the guys who are running this commission, this is their research. I'm always intrigued that in some ways it's not being applied, but the world of biomechanics has been able to measure. This is where numbers are so important to measure when you do this, this will happen. So I can easily identify a flaw that happens. And trust me, you guys go out of whack the way a sports car gets out of whack. 3 rounds around the track and the tires have to be changed. Power pitchers have to have the same thing. So early prediction to avoid injury. That to me is one of the primary ways I keep you guys safe. What do you have to say about that, Joe?
Absolutely. I think that's the number one key is getting on top of it before it happens. I remember there was many times where you would say, "Hey, your elbow's getting a little in front of your shoulder, and this will cause this to happen if you keep doing that." And so we would correct it then and there before that would happen. So I think that's number one in injury prevention is noticing lapses in your mechanics and fixing them before they become a problem.
Exactly, Rallin.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Joe. And whenever you tell me that something little that I'm doing, if I don't fix it, could lead to some type of injury, I always want to get on top of it because I've been in the gym with you and you've told me like this MLB guy is going to blow out soon because he's doing this if he doesn't fix it. And I'd say that like 90% of those predictions have come true. So I don't want to play around with that.
I know it is scary, and I want to thank the Athletic directly for putting up photos of photographers don't know. This week, I've sent 3, 4 photos out with the most recent starters, the big starters that are all going down like flies this last month, and the still shot was like, oh no, look at this. And Rallin, my hat's off to you because Rallin doesn't even ask me. He goes, oh no, ouch. And so he's getting good at film analysis. But yes, absolutely. And it's a great thing to be able to explain to someone and show someone what can happen. The second thing is early recognition and admission to soreness that you get, because the soreness is your body's way of talking to you. So, like I was saying, Joe, you would call me immediately following. And, the system we used is one that I said, yeah, I've got to encourage my pitchers to call me right away. So with every pitcher I work with, I let them know I'm open 24/7. Send me a text anytime. And as the minute something goes wrong, I need to know. And getting on top of it right away. Joe, I don't think any soreness with you lasted more than 2 or 3 days. And Rowland, what do you have to say about the early recognition of soreness as your body's way of talking to you?
Now, yeah, as a pitcher, whenever you feel something small, like you can get worried about it. I mean, that's one of the best things about working with you is just as soon as I feel something small, I just call you and then we get on top of it. And then, I mean, basically it just goes away after that. So nothing ever gets too serious.
Exactly. And so pitchers need somebody they can call and talk to about that, right? So we're leading to pitchers needing to take responsibility for what's going on in their life and who they work with. And you should be picking carefully who you work with so that things don't get out of hand. The third thing is we always followed recovery guidelines. That's the common denominator. We followed the original USA Baseball guidelines. And Joe, I remember distinctly that when they altered them, so we know that 39 pitches or less was 1 day recovery, and they changed them. And I remember the day over at College Park, I walked up to you and I said, Joe, they just came out with a revision to the guidelines, and now it's 44 pitchers with 1 day recovery. What do you think? I don't ask questions unless I already know how I feel about it. And I said, what do you think, Joe? And you said, no way, I'm sticking with 39. And I said, exactly. Why would we, especially in the era of more injuries, change the guidelines to be less conservative? And they have done this and they're thinking of doing it again. And it is really scary. So we have always followed recovery guidelines. So Joe and Rallin, do you see other pitchers following recovery guidelines?
It depends. When I was younger, yes. As I got older, it kind of was more lenient. It would be instead of 39 exactly, they'd be like, I threw about 40, and like they would call it a 1 day recovery. And so I think what separated us was like we were firm on that 39 and 40 and 59 and 60. And if we went one pitch over, we would give it an extra day. I mean, why not? You're talking about recovering from a game where you just went max effort for 7 innings. You might as well get all the rest you can, you know?
Exactly. And Rallin?
Yeah, I think that, like Joe just said, there's not a like firm limit that people follow. And I also think that the biggest thing that I've seen is that people don't pitch when they are recovered. Like if they throw, say, 55 pitches, then they think that 2 days later is like way too soon.
Right. So not pitching enough. Right. When you have guidelines, and it's just like bodybuilding, if you get sore in your biceps, and then the minute they're not sore, you got to train them again if you want them to grow. But people like, let me give it a week's rest and you never get anywhere. Excellent point, Rowland. Okay. I've got two more items on this list, guys, that are, I think, rules of the road that we always use. Arm preparation, arm warm up, and recovery that we do, not just at the field, but what the other rules were. I don't even have to say them because you both always did the same thing. So, Joe, by the way, my first pitch strike and recovery program, as I mentioned, Joe is a part of an 11-year-old group where I was doing all these experimental things, and I designed a warm-up program. Trevor Larnack is on it. Of course, Joe's on it. Willie McIver's on it, and a lot of other great pitchers are on it. And we filmed it. I think you were just starting high school. You were in 8th grade. And because the body never changes, the warm-up is perfect. It's called the First Pitch Strike program. It has a warm-up for the arm and a recovery program for the arm. And it is something that they did. I think that is part of the biggest reason for you guys staying uninjured is because you were always warmed up. The band you used was not a heavy band. It's less than 5 pounds. And it also serves as a rehab program. So if you call me and say, hey, I tweaked something pitching, I say, which exercise hurt you? You tell me, and then I can diagnose from that what it is. And so we are able to use that for more than just one thing. Speak on that and how much you think that has played a role in staying uninjured.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I felt something and you would say, all right, external rotations, 4 sets of 20, and I would crush it and then take the next day off and it would be gone. So I think it was an amazing tool, not only for warming up and warming down after throwing, but for, like you said, diagnosing what muscle is fatigued or injured based on what we tell you.
Yeah. And Rowland?
Yeah, exactly what Joe just said. Like whenever I'm doing pre-pitch, It's great. I think it's one of the biggest things that's kept me uninjured, but it also lets me know if I'm all the way recovered or not. Because if I feel anything small in any of the exercises doing pre-pitch, I let you know, and then we adjust accordingly. Yeah.
Love that, Rallin. And the last item on my list of rules of the road, the constant rebuilding and restoring your body in the gym. Talk about that, Joe, the importance of that, because strength training and off-season training was a huge part of our program, and it is with all my pitchers.
Yeah, we started lifting when I was 11 years old. I remember being a little intimidated, like, how are these guys putting up so much weight? Not knowing, like, one day I would get there. So I remember that very distinctly. It was fun. Each off season, we'd come in and say, what mile per hour do we want to hit the next year? It would be 95. If that was our goal, we would hit the weight room like we were trying to hit 95 with a lot of max effort training. So I think the strength portion of being an athlete is extremely important. And a lot of strength coaches now are kind of shying away from it. They're, I think, scared that if they do an exercise that could help you, but you get injured, that they may be blamed for it. So I think strength coaches are in a tough position, but I don't think they're utilizing their strength to help pitchers. I think they're kind of just worried about injuries more than helping pitchers get better.
Yes, exactly. And Rallin?
Yeah, I think that all the stuff we do in the gym has been really helpful, not just preventing injuries and helping me gain velocity in the right way, but also like it just teaches you how to move your body in the right way and feel each small muscle and like have your shoulder in the right position or just stuff like that you couldn't really learn on the mound.
Exactly. Well, listen, guys, this has been the most wonderful interview, and I can't thank you enough. It's been an honor to work with both of you and to listen to you guys talk and how smart you are. I feel awesome that you are that educated. And Rallin, I know you're still pitching and your future is bright, but I feel very safe right now about you, and it is really great to hear. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for being a part of this interview.
Yeah, thank you, Angel. This was amazing. I hope you continue to keep pushing pitchers to get better and stay healthy.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. I look forward to keep progressing, hopefully injury-free with you. And yeah, thanks, Angel.
Fantastic. I look forward to it as well. Okay, guys, thank you again. Wow, right? And so refreshing to hear. Anyway, let's get to my take-home messages for you. First, velocity should be celebrated and respected. Once you take that position and are therefore unafraid of it and accept that it is here to stay, emphasis can be put on making sure that pitchers stay safe while developing their velocity. My second take-home message, and this is for the MLB and for coaches everywhere, in particular, after an injury, please don't let a pitcher return to flat ground throwing or pitching with the same mechanical issue that was the cause of the breakdown in the first place. Notice that most injuries occur in the extremity, the shoulder joint and or the elbow. The arm is supposed to receive forces from the other parts of the body and its motion. Faulty stride mechanics and or faulty rotation mechanics are usually the culprit. Get your pitcher's mechanics analyzed to determine the cause or weakness in the pitcher's motion, or you are running the risk of a re-injury. And my third and final take-home message, and this does have to do with the hunt for velocity. Some of the exotic methods being used to increase velocity from the outside in rather than the inside out can be not only dangerous to the body and interfere with proper mechanics, but moreover interfere with the recovering arm. If a method is not skill specific in terms of the 60-foot, 6-inch, 5.5-ounce scenario, then it can do more harm than good. So that's a wrap for this episode, and I thank you for being a listener. If you are interested in learning more about the First Pitch Strike arm preparation and recovery program that Rallin and Joe were talking about, you can find it on my website, Angel Borrelli Pitching. And feel free to contact me if you have any questions or comments. My email is angel@gymscience.com. Thank you again for tuning in and hopefully turning on for some deep thinking about our baseball pitchers.